Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our talk about the what, why, where, and how of WWOOFing for the World Social Forum for Transformative Economies. We're broadcasting to you today from the UK. My name is Scarlett Penn, and I'm a trustee for the Global Federation of WWOOF Organisations. I'm the coordinator of WWOOF UK, and I've been doing that for 13 years. And I'm also a host here in the UK.
My name's Imogen Lacey. I'm a WWOOFer. I've been at Scarlett Smallholding WWOOFing for the last 3 months or so for the whole duration of the coronavirus lockdown here. And I'll be here till the end of the growing season, roughly, so to the end of the summer. And yeah, welcome.
And we do understand that a lot of the people watching today, English won't be their first language, so we will try and keep the presentation nice and slow and understandable, we hope.
So we thought today that we'd structure the talk around these 4 questions of the what, the why, the where, and the how of WWOOFing. And hopefully this talk will give a bit of an insight into WWOOFing from the perspective of a volunteer and of a host. So I guess the first question is, what is WWOOFing?
What is WWOOFing? Well, WWOOF connects people who want to learn about a more ecological and responsible way of living on this earth and of growing their food. And it connects them with hosts who are already living this kind of lifestyle and who are willing to share their lives, their space, give accommodation and food in exchange for practical help upon the land, whilst also giving a knowledge exchange, whilst also providing an educational experience. That's really core to the heart of what WWOOF is about.
And I think the other thing to say is that it's mutually beneficial for both the host and the WWOOFer. So it's not just a way of getting free labour for the host, and it's not just a free holiday for the volunteer. There's a kind of symbiotic exchange going on, which is beneficial for both parties.
Well said. Okay, so believe it or not, WWOOF is almost 50 years old. We turn 50 at the end of this year. It was started in the UK, in England, by a lady called Sue Coppard. And she lived in London. She was a secretary, and she remembered back to her childhood having a very nice time on her uncle's farm. And she wanted to get back to that more meaningful way of life. And so she contacted a couple of friends. She contacted a willing farmer that she found, and she had a weekend with her friends in the countryside, and so started working weekends on organic farms, as it was known back then. Since then, it has grown into a worldwide movement. WWOOF is represented now in 135 countries around the world. And we have about 110,000 volunteers and about 16,000 hosts across the world. And goodness knows how many exchange hours that translates into. And the Federation of WWOOF organisations does unify us across the globe, and the information can be found at WWOOF.net. We've got the website there on the page for you.
Okay, so that's sort of where WWOOF's come from and a bit about its core values. So we thought it'd be good to have a look at what WWOOFing might be and what it might look like. So these are all photos which are taken either here on Scarlett Smallholding or nearby in the UK. And we thought they showed a really nice diversity and the kind of broad scope of tasks that woofers do with their hosts and can learn about when they're woofing. So as you can see, we've got growing food. Of course, that's the kind of core of what goes on, but there's a huge amount that goes around that of harvesting, preserving the harvest, and then preparing for the next season, coming out of the winter and getting things ready for growing in the spring, and other things as well. So many woof hosts have livestock and animals, so you could be learning how to take care of sheep or pigs or chickens or llamas, and there's other elements as well, so all elements of living on a farm or a small holding or wherever organic growing is taking place. That could include building projects, preserving ancient techniques, handicrafts. So we've got a picture of willow weaving for basketry down the bottom there. And I think you can see here as well that, as well as a kind of broad range of tasks, woofing is done by a big range of people as well. So people of all different ages, from children to people who are retired, people of all different abilities and of levels of experience. So I have woofed a little bit in the past, but I really was a beginner when I came here to Scarlet Smallholding, and so I'm learning a huge amount all the time. But there might be people who have their own expertise who are willing to kind of exchange both ways. And it seems to be that it's a common thing to do when you're at a kind of crossroads in life. So maybe people who are on their gap year before they go to university, or just graduated, or before you settle down and have kids, or you've been made redundant, or you're changing career, or have a kind of epiphany about wanting to live a more sustainable lifestyle, where you're retired and you're wanting to do something with your retirement. Those all seem to be kind of common points where people might go woofing. My experience was having graduated from a postgraduate degree and wanting to do something different. So that's a kind of good segue into the next slide, which will be talking a bit about my personal experience and a bit about the whys of why you would go woofing.
And that's you.
That's me, yeah. So there I am on the small holding with our first harvest of carrots a few weeks ago, looking extremely proud, even though it wasn't me who sowed them. So what were my whys for woofing? As I already mentioned, I was at one of these crossroad points in life. I'd just graduated from my master's degree, and I really didn't want to get into the whole kind of cycle of earning a wage to pay for rent, to carry on working and getting locked into that cycle. So I'm really lucky in that I also have a remote job. I can work online, which can fit in with woofing, because it's only part-time. So there's a kind of ability to do voluntary work and paid work at the same time for me. But my main why is to learn, and specifically about organic growing for food production, and learning about permaculture. And permaculture was an idea which I was interested in and didn't really know anything about, and wanted to experience in a hands-on way. So maybe now it's time to talk about the whys of hosting.
Yes. So why would I want to be a host? And that is me there on the right. And I chose this slide because it shows me teaching a volunteer from South Africa how to seed save lettuces. And for me, I suppose that encapsulates everything. It's about how we can bring along the next generation of farmers and growers and people who are thinking consciously and living consciously with the next generation of our food supply, essentially our seeds. So it is very much for me about the educational side of things, and giving also some experience for somebody who would never otherwise have the ability to connect with the land in a space such that I have the real privilege and good fortune to steward. I have an 8-acre, which is 3.25 hectare, permaculture, no-dig smallholding, which I manage for wildlife and biodiversity, as well as for food. And I have a forest garden and all sorts of different and interesting habitats. And I don't have any machinery, and I don't use chemicals, obviously. And it takes a lot more engaging with the earth with your hands. And so the willing help that I get from the volunteers really does help me. So that is another motivation. So we have the education and the help. Also living quite rurally, although there are 3 people otherwise on site, it's also very nice to have some extra company, if I'm honest, somebody to chat with at the dinner table. It really makes a big difference to my own quality of life here in rural England. And it's Imogen, as she said, is actually very local. Imogen comes from only about 20 miles away. For me, that's very nice to have that conversation with a very like-minded person in the same language. Also, it's very interesting if you've got someone from abroad with a completely different culture and cuisine and outlook on life, and the conversations there can be equally interesting. So it's very diverse, nutritious way of life for me. So that's my motivations for being a host. So we're entering now into a little section on why WWOOF is different to other exchange organisations, because we're really not just about a cheap way of having a holiday. Very core to WWOOF's central beliefs is the ethics of the exchange. And also with that, actually this slide makes me laugh, because every time I look at the expression on the face of the man, I see the other quality that WWOOF is all about, and that is trust. So you're having, from the perspective of a host, you're having somebody come along and enter your house and live with you, and you have to trust that they are going to be respectful of your space and your values and your ways of living. And from a WWOOFer's perspective, you're entering the house of somebody you've never met before, quite possibly without a form of transport, perhaps, or whatever. So you really are placing your faith in the hands of your host and trusting that everything is going to be okay. And that trust is really strongly built into our very core statement, the WWOOF's global mission statement, which I can show you there. And so it's a movement linking volunteers with people growing to promote cultural exchanges. There we are, based on trust and non-monetary exchange.
Education is really key there as well, like you said earlier.
Yeah. And we're doing our best to build up a sustainable global community with what we're doing here with WWOOF.
Yeah, so this is maybe a bit more detail about the kind of unique qualities of WWOOFing, which make it different from other kinds of exchange organisations which have sprung up. So really the key point to take away from this slide is the idea, well, the fact that all WWOOF organisations around the world are either non-profit or of charity status. So any money that goes into WWOOFing from the membership fees of volunteers and hosts goes into this mission statement and the reality of promoting and fostering a more ethical way of life. And yeah, it's an important thing to think about, the fact that WWOOFing benefits the host, it benefits the volunteer, but the whole process is benefiting the world because it is developing this different and ethical way of living. And it also supports organic growers or farmers or people stewarding the land. And that's another way that it benefits the world. And as Scarlett said, the emphasis on education means that there's a new generation, or the next generation, of people who want to live consciously and who want to grow food consciously, can develop their knowledge and their practical skills and go on to pass their knowledge on to further generations, or to set up new establishments which are growing food in this beautiful way. Those skills can also be brought back. You know, you might go off WWOOFing as a holiday and then go back to your regular life and inspire yourself to grow your own food at home and bring those ideas about sustainable lifestyles back into kind of your regular life, which is fantastic. And it's a way to engage with those ideals and ways of living which you might not otherwise have the chance to experience.
Great, thank you. So we move on to a part of the presentation which I'm not going to pretend that I fully understand. It's not my strength, but as we are here as part of the conference that we are part of in Transformational Economies, it seems very relevant. And I would like to thank WWOOF Germany for introducing this slide. It centres around the work done by an Austrian, Matthias, well, I can't pronounce his surname, Farfelederen. I hope I've said that right. He did his entire doctorate thesis, master's thesis rather, on this concept of WWOOF as a global solidarity economy network. It seems very relevant to what we're talking about today and why we're all here. So WWOOF is non-profit, and in some countries it is actually registered as a charity. That is the case here in the UK. So we're a network of like-minded people across the globe, and we have shared principles and shared values, and as already mentioned, a lot of trust. And that brings about solidarity among our members. And we're building up a lot of this thing called social capital because of it. And where these practices that we're doing meet with the ethics and the framework of a solidarity economy are met below. So we have things, well, there are 5 points listed below really: participatory democracy. Everything is agreed between the WWOOFer and the host. There's complete equity there. The self-organisation and the voluntary nature of what is being done both by the WWOOFer and the host. No one is in any contract, and any arrangement that is made by both parties, in agreement with both parties, can be left at any point. The WWOOF organisation is different from the state. We don't have, whilst we adhere to the guidelines of charities and non-profit organisations, we are not related to the state. And the last point, a fair distribution of surplus. What WWOOF Germany have written here is that it's something else that is growing instead of money. and that is being shared. So the knowledge, the cultural exchange, the educational exchange, the social exchange.
And the food.
The food, always the food with WWOOF. So I hope I've given a good enough explanation of that slide. I think we can move on now.
Yeah, so we've looked in quite a lot of detail about the whats and the whys of WWOOFing. And so now we're going to go into a bit more detail about the wheres. So here you can see a wonderful selection of the kinds of dwellings and structures which might be a place where you would stay as a woofer. I think you said that 4 out of 5 of these buildings are in the UK. So even within the UK, there's a huge diversity of where you might go to woof. And it kind of reflects the diversity of what a host can be. So, for example, Scarlett's place here is as we've discussed, organic permaculture, no-dig smallholding. But within the UK, there are schools who are WWOOF hosts, there are community agriculture projects, there are intentional communities, eco-villages, even people's private homes with a big garden or an allotment, which they need help with. So as a volunteer, you might be staying in a suburban house in Manchester, or you might be staying in a cob building or a straw bale house on an eco-village. Here at the smallholding, I'm staying in a caravan basically in the vegetable garden out amongst the nature and the growing, and then come into the house for meals. So it's kind of part of the cultural exchange to go to somewhere and be really part of the community and part of the dwelling places and the lifestyle of the host. So that's the kind of key point, that it's not necessarily a farm in a commercial understanding of what that might be. And yeah, this kind of idea about being in a relationship between the host and the volunteer is so crucial. You know, you're woofing with the people that you go and stay with, or with the volunteer that you have come and stay with you. So it's a really social experience for most people, and that often centres around food, because of course what you'll likely be doing as a woofer is helping to grow food, and so often you'll be eating what you've been helping to produce, loads of fresh, organic, local and seasonal food. Often that's the case. Some hosts will do things a bit differently and have a different approach to how they supply meals. So that's something that, you know, you can discuss. If it's important to you to know the food ethics of what you're eating, then that's something you can discuss with your volunteer or with your host. And yeah, as you said earlier, I think, you know, the element of cultural exchange is great, and often that can revolve around food. A lot of great conversations about identity and culture can spring up around cooking and eating together. So if you're going to a different country to WWOOF, you could bring your national dish and cook that for your hosts and share your cultural culture of food, and vice versa, learn about different cultures' approach to food.
Absolutely. I always encourage woofers to bring their national dish. Love it when people cook. So another thing to think about then is, and this is getting into how you're going to plan your trip, and what kind of experience do you want? So it might for you revolve around the geography of the place. It might be a country or a part of the country. It might be the sort of climate that you feel that you would enjoy or want to experience growing in. As a great example, Imogen really doesn't like the hot weather, which is generally fine in England, but we have just come out of 2 extremely hot days.
Yeah.
And you were incapacitated. You couldn't do anything, could you?
Well, indoor stuff.
Yes. So a good note for hosts: have a big range of activities on standby if we need to vary things a little. But yes. So what sort of climate are you interested in, or would feel comfortable in? Maybe you're really wanting to learn about growing for yourself because you want to translate this back to your own home environment. So what kind of soil might you be looking at? Something broader. Are you particularly interested in making growing part of your living? Are you interested in becoming a market gardener, for example, or getting your own piece of land and becoming subsistence farming, providing just for yourself? All of these things feed into the decision you make as a volunteer about what sort of host you might like to select. One thing I would say is if you are going to travel, please do consider the way you travel, and please do try and make it as sustainable as possible and avoid flying if that is an option for you. I certainly can tell you that here in the UK, there are hosts that will not accept volunteers that have come into the country using an aeroplane. Just something to think about. So we're talking a bit about planning, so perhaps we're moving into now the how of woofing.
Yeah, so if you've decided that this sounds like something that you'd want to do and you want to plan your own woofing experience, a really good place to start is going to WWOOF.net, which you can see a screenshot of here. So WWOOF.net is the homepage for FOWO, the Global Federation of Woof organisations that we've already mentioned before. And on this website, there's a list of every single woof group around the world. So, there's, as you can see here, the list of all the national woof organisations. So if you were interested in travelling, for example, as I was, to my own country, the UK, down the bottom of the list for the European woof groups, you can see the UK. So I would have clicked on there, and that would have taken me to the WWOOF UK website. So you have to join the WWOOF group of the country that you want to visit. So as a volunteer who wanted to WWOOF in the UK, I had to join WWOOF UK and pay the membership fee as a volunteer. If I wanted to go to Japan, I would have clicked Japan, gone to the WWOOF Japan website and joined as a member of WWOOF Japan. And if I was planning a big globe-trotting adventure and wanted to WWOOF all around the world, then I'd have to join for each country that I wanted to go to. There are hosts in countries which don't have their own WWOOF organisation, and these are organised under WWOOF independence. So as you can see here, say I wanted to WWOOF in Albania, there's only one WWOOF host in all of Albania. So they are looked after under the aegis of WWOOF independence, and then I would join WWOOF independent, which would give me access to all of these independent nations. This is a screenshot of what it would look like to try and find a host under WWOOF independent. So if I was going to go to Albania, for example, and as a member of WWOOF independent, I'd be able to see, as you can see, hosts all around the world, and you can either search for location or country, or you can use the map to zoom in and look at the countries where there are hosts. So the way that it works for me, looking at the WWOOF UK website, so when I was planning my own WWOOFing here in the UK, was once I'd joined the WWOOF UK group, I wanted to make sure that the host that I was going to volunteer with was the right place for me. So, of course, location was really important to me. As we've already said, I'm very local to this area, so I wanted to stay somewhere which felt familiar and also would help me learn about the specific soil and environment that we have here, and also to start building a local network of people who are involved in organic growing and permaculture. So I could search by the counties in England, or use them, or Scotland, or Wales, or Northern Ireland, or use the map to zoom in. And as well as location, there's a huge range of other filters that you might want to use when you're thinking about what kind of woofing experience you want to have. So say you were coming to the UK from another country and you wanted to feel like there was someone who spoke your language, you can search by languages spoken. You can search by the kind of animals a host might have if you're interested in learning about particular livestock. You can search by methodologies, which was a really useful one for me. So I could specifically search for permaculture as a keyword, because that was something that I was so interested in learning about. And the filter that you can see here is another really useful one. So you can search for dietary preference. For me, it was important to go to a vegetarian household. But if you were vegan or gluten-free, then you can check that the host that you're wanting to volunteer with can meet your needs in that way. So yeah, and then once I kind of narrowed down the list and I found Scarlett's profile on the WWOOF UK website and felt that she was the right place for me, then I could start up a dialogue with her and a communication, so we can plan our exchange and make sure that it would work for both of us, and we shared the same expectations basically. So that's a really, really key element of planning your exchange, is to, as soon as possible, contact the host, start having a conversation about your plans and what kind of help they need, and so you can develop a plan which is beneficial for the both of you. Yeah, so I think that's really the key point, is communication.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize that enough. Certainly as a host, it's, let's make sure everybody knows what the expectation is of the exchange before you fully agree that it's going to happen. Now, I'm just feeling a little bit distracted because I think someone was trying to get into the room and I couldn't see a way to do it. So Imogen, if you could just have a quick look.
Oh, I see. I think it was just a notification from the chat.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's great.
So, yes, that's the point to emphasize: communication, 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 all the way. And that is number one on our 10 top tips. And so this is a little bit of a recap in a way. It's going back over some things that we've already said, but some of these points are so key to getting the most out of your woofing experience. I have, in the course of my work with WWOOF, I have dealt with people who have been dissatisfied with their experience, and I will struggle to think of, maybe there's a few examples, but very, very few, where the answer hasn't been, if the host and the woofer had communicated more clearly and more honestly, that there would not have been an issue that had arisen. So also planning. What do you want to get out of your experience? As we've been through, the location you might want to be in, the skills you might want to gain. And think about this well in advance. I'm contacted sometimes by volunteers who want to come along next week, and I plan a lot more in advance. And I think you will find a lot of hosts do that. And also you can make the most of your trip in every way if you're planning in advance. Travel as sustainably as you can. As I say, some hosts in this country won't accept volunteers who have flown. And even so, as a volunteer, for an ethical organisation, you want to be thinking about how you can keep your carbon footprint and your you want to be thinking about how you can do things as sustainably as possible in every way, basically. If your circumstances change and for whatever reason you can't keep an appointment or an agreement, whether you're a host, whether you're a volunteer, let the other party know. It's just common courtesy. It's part of what we're talking here as transformational economics and solidarity economy and social capital. It's all relevant. Do what you say you are going to do. If you can't, let the other person know. Back to point one, communicate well. Pack sensibly. Think about the things that you need to take with you. Because woofing is a very practical experience, you need to think about sensible things to put on your feet. You need to think about clothes that you're going to wear that are appropriate to the climate, if it's rain, if it's snow, if it's very hot.
And that's something you can talk about with your host as well. If you're going to a different country which you haven't had knowledge of before, you're not sure what weather to maybe expect, get in touch.
Certainly, take advice, communicate, basically. Also take along things that you absolutely can't live without, but which you can't reasonably expect your host to provide. So a host isn't going to provide you with everything you need in life. They will provide you with reasonable basics. And then you take along anything else that you really must have. Chocolate does feature very high on most people's lists, I must say. Research the area where you're going to, because you might be next to an ancient monument, or you might realise that it's suddenly very good cycling in your area. Make sure that you are ready to make the best of your spare time and get the full immersion of the place where you've gone. Be open and be prepared to experience something that is different from your normal way of life. That's why you've come away, for a different experience. Be open to that. And finally, and we always say it, is absolutely have fun. So there's going to be a fair amount of time for questions, probably about 15 minutes, but we thought we would put some questions that we really often are asked up front and in the presentation, and then we'll welcome questions from our audience today. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, can I woof with children? Can I woof with my family? The answer is yes, but not every host is going to be in a position to take children. They may consider it unsafe, for example. Also, as a volunteer, you've got to be thinking of the fair exchange here. So if you were one parent woofing with one child, then maybe quite a lot of your time might have to be taken up with childcare, which is fine, but there may be an acknowledgement then that a normal or full exchange might not be able to be experienced on the part of the host. So in what other ways can there be some sort of looking to make that an equal experience? And if the host is fine with it, this is, again, back to communication. If they're all right with it, if you've spoken about it, that's fine. If there are other children on the site, that's the best way to get around the problem, because then all the children can be together and form their own community, while the adults are doing what they need to do. So yes, absolutely, children can go woofing, but it's a negotiation between the host and the volunteer. Woof does nothing more than facilitate the connection between these two sets of people. Once they are in dialogue, it is up to them to organise themselves independently. So what else have we got? Yes, this is a common question. So, and I think it owes, the question is asked a lot because we have our name, Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. Woof. So organic, the word organic in there. Do you have to be certified organic? And the answer is no. My small holding here in the UK is not certified organic. However, we do require a host to have an organic mindset, practicing methods that do not involve chemicals, and a way of life that is respectful to all beings on the planet. There may be that there is organic certification, and this is probably more likely in a commercial venture because it costs money to be certified. There is on the website a box that you can tick if you particularly want the host to be organically certified. You will probably find that most won't be, or a lot won't be, certainly. So in the same way as you don't have to be a farm, it can be another establishment that does ecological growing and sustainable ways of living. You have to have an organic mindset, but not necessarily certification. Now, this may be just a question we get asked a lot in the UK, but we get asked a lot of the time, can I bring my dog? Again, I hope the message is going to get through now. It's all about communication. So if I have cows and sheep on my land, I probably don't want somebody else's dog there. But if I have a lot of dogs myself and no other livestock, or it's fine and the livestock are used to dogs, it's fine. We have people asking about other animals, actually, other pets. And really, any question that you could ask, it is about the dialogue between the host and the volunteer and what's okay for them.
Okay, so I think we've covered hopefully a lot of the key questions of the what, why, where and hows of woofing, and this is our kind of really key takeaway. Once you've done all the planning and you've got a really great exchange set up where everyone's happy and it works for both the host and the volunteer, and you've done all of the interesting tasks and helped with some great projects, then also remember to take time and relax and enjoy the place where you are. And be open to what the exchange might bring, the adventures that you might have with the people and the non-human people that you might meet on your travels.
Yeah.
Okay, so that takes us up to quarter to the hour. So we've got time for some questions now.